Right. So now I'm going to talk about the legacy on um, the West by Zoroastrianism. And that's aside from the potential influence of it on Judaism and Christianity. Um, Although to the extent of that is debatable, and of course for religious Jews and Christians that would not be the case. But having said that, I also need to kind of clarify something that I didn't mention. So this is the main religion in ancient in Persia and what we know as Iran until the coming of Islam. Islam now is the dominant religion of Iran. There does exist a minority of Zoroastrians that still exist there. They are just like Jews, Christians, and Zoroastrians are able to live and even have some political representation in the Islamic government, believe it or not, in Iran. As an interesting side note, the largest Jewish population outside of Israel in that region is Iran. Now, despite the fact that Iran talks about destruction to Israel, they have it's a misunderstood. The Jews are not being ethnically cleansed, nor have they been, from Iran, but they're still not equal, right? They're not still treated as equals, and there's still discrimination. So on one hand, it's not as bad as the Western media has presented it, but it's still not what our standards would be for minorities, okay, if that makes sense. Same thing with Zoroastrians, and at times Zoroastrians have faced a lot of persecution from different regimes, and many of them fled to India, and there they're called Parsis. So you have many Zoroastrians, though, that still exist within the global community as a diasporic community. And so I just kind of wanted to point that out. And the next video I'm going to show you is a Zoroastrian that many of you know of, but you just didn't know he was a Zoroastrian by birth. Let's talk about some of his legacies. Zoroaster was mentioned by Aristotle, believe it or not. Friedrich Nietzsche, I stepped ahead of myself there when I talked about his work, Thus Spoke, or Thus Spake, in some translations, Zarathustra, a book for all and none. This particular book by this German philosopher, and by the way, Nietzsche, he's the guy who famously said, or infamously said, God is dead and we have killed him. He wrote scathing remarks against Christianity, although he came from a Protestant background. His father was a clergyman. And he essentially saw, though, he was a classicist, not a philosopher by profession. And one of his other works, he mentions that he basically thinks that this idea of good and evil, this dualism that's been brought up, was basically a terrible thing brought into the world, and that he really pinpointed it on Zarathustra, or Zoroaster. And in a sense, by him taking this character and then rewriting his own major philosophy about life, in it, he's letting Zoroaster destroy his old legacy and bring him in as a new vision of becoming an Übermensch, an overman, or a superman. Now, the political ideology that's going to embrace this, and many believe misinterpreting Nietzsche, is actually going to be the Nazis, and they're going to see this Übermensch that's talked about in this book as the Overman, the Superman, and the super Aryan white man, white Germanic soldier of the Nazis. Again, you shouldn't let the Nazis' obsession with Nietzsche make you think that he would have supported that. It was his sister that promoted his idea, that made him become the quintessential philosopher of the Third Reich. That's for another debate. But I just kind of wanted to show you, though, how Zoroaster then even gets wedged in somehow indirectly into philosophical discourse, even in Nazi Germany. Okay, right? And then alongside Goethe's Faust, even that text, the New Testament, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and Yeah, that's right. Luther's New Testament translation and Goethe's Faust were the most common books held for literate German soldiers in World War I, just for example. And so what he said in Ecce Homo, coming from Nietzsche, Zarathustra created the most calamitous error, morality. Consequently, he must also be the first to recognize it. The self-overcoming of morality out of truthfulness, the self-overcoming of the moralist into his opposite, into me. That is what the name of Zarathustra means in my mouth. So there's the quote of what Nietzsche was trying to do. He was trying to undo Zarathustra, Zoroaster's legacy on the West, which he links in also with Christianity. Then we have this picture, the famous one of the School of Athens by Raphael in the 16th century. And in this one, he's having a depiction of Zoroaster as well in here, or his, he's interpreting that's Zoroaster in the picture. So he's been, if you as a student have not been familiar with him and Zoroastrianism, Zoroaster and the legacy of Zoroastrianism has definitely been understood and known by thinking people in the West for some time. Again, also they have this legendary conflict with Greece, and as I mentioned before earlier, and we're going to talk more about this when I go over Greece, that there's many motifs that Greece are going to have depicting a conflict with Persia that are going to spill over into modern political discourse. Okay. And so that's just something I just kind of wanted you to think about. The Battle of Thermopylae is legendary. Again, the movie 300 celebrates that. And even the way that the movie 300 depicts things, it's freedom versus despotism, right? So Greece is going to always kind of like symbolize in the West democracy, freedom, even though Sparta was far from free and far from democratic, even in the ancient sense. But that's what's going to symbolize. And Persia is going to symbolize often. There's a philosopher, Montesquieu. He wrote The Spirit of Laws, which influenced heavily our own political ideas. He wrote a book called The Persian Letters, in which he mocks the court of Louis the 14th as being despotic, and kind of characterizes him as an Asiatic despot in the Persian tradition. Okay, so this kind of motifs pop up. I just want you to be aware of also. Okay, I'm going to show you this, end this with this clip here. And it's talking about Freddie Mercury's sister. Freddie Mercury he's dead now. He was the singer of Queen. You know that song at football games? We will rock you. That guy? Or, Mamma Mia, let me go. You ever see the, in one of those movies? Forget what it was called. Anyhow, watch, you'll see.
One of the best-known Zoroastrians certainly lived up to this glamorous image. Oh, yes, I'm the great pretender. Freddie Mercury was from a Zoroastrian family.
I'll always walk around like a Persian popinjay. That's part of me, and no one's gonna stop me, honey. I pretend too much. I'm lonely, but no.
Freddie's sister remembers how proud he was of his Persian roots.
There must be more to life than this.
Freddie was born Farrokh Bulsara, and that name is Persian or Parsi. And both my parents were born in Bombay. Mum and Dad were religious. They would do prayers every day. And we as a family were very proud of being Zoroastrian. My religion is a very, very ancient Persian. So that's why not many people have either heard of it or understood it.
I had this perfect dream.
I think with Freddie, what the Zoroastrian faith gave him is to work hard, to persevere,
Let the songs begin.
and to follow your dreams.
After Freddie's death, his family held a service here at the Zoroastrian Centre in Harrow in London.
I think when the prayers take place and the priests are all dressed in white, and then we have the little urn with the fire, and you concentrate on your prayers, and it just makes you feel at peace near your God, and it's just very special.
All right, I hope you found that little bit interesting. And now every time you hear "We Will Rock You," any Queen song, that you'll think of this lecture and be a more worldly wise person for it. As they say in Persian, Khodafez, may God be your keeper. And this is the end of this lecture set.